people get by. We say maintains human self-sufficiency by giving people a hand up and not a handout. As you had mentioned at the top of the hour, I'm also a best-selling author of my debut book, On the Rocks, which is a partnership between myself and my former AP English teacher, Ruthie Dines Robbins. And we got together and wrote this project. And basically, it's a narrative nonfiction that reads like fiction set in during the 80s through the early 2000s. And it's the rise of and fall of my father, who was a very well-known restaurateur during that time, of the Primadonna restaurant in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, which is just slightly outside of the city of Pittsburgh. So I'm glad to be here with you.
That's so awesome, Maria. And you know, I I grew up in Pennsylvania also, or I lived in Pennsylvania also. And what was it like to be in that kind of famous restaurant? Because there's something about Pennsylvania that their restaurants in general, like they'll have the one in town. You know,
Yeah, for
there's that
sure.
place. So, what was it like to actually live in that kind of environment?
Well, what was really interesting is, the story set during the 80s and 90s, and this was well before the time of StreamYard and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. And so really what it was word of mouth. And, my dad was the master at making relationships, writing old-fashioned letters to people and invitations asking them to come down and visit. The story starts whenever my dad is a struggling postal worker looking to get into a different business, and he buys a restaurant off of somebody else that's not doing too well in McKees Rocks, Pennsylvania, which is not like a New York City or Chicago. It's just a small suburb outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that no one's really ever heard of until last year, whenever Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field, the Buffalo Bills star. He, in fact, is actually from McKees Rocks, and his mother's daycare that he's raised, I think, $9 million for, shares a back alleyway with what once was the Prima Donna. But for the first years, it was very much of a struggle just to get to know people in the area and to also get the word out about the restaurant, because we didn't have all these wonderful newfangled social media inventions and websites and things that we have now. But whenever it was booming, and it truly was booming after 1988, whenever we got a really large review by Mike Kalina in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, it was a magical experience because people were coming into the area who you normally wouldn't see in McKees Rocks. People like Danny Aiello and Jamie Lee Curtis and Tommy Lasorda, and Frank Sinatra was snagging takeouts from us. So it was a really cool experience. When you grow up in a restaurant, it's an experience like no other, because you grow up with the public, right? So, customers know you since you're like that tall, and they feel like they've known you your entire life because they have. So it's a unique experience. It's a very fun experience. It's a very different way to grow up, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, and it was kind of crazy reading through some of the things. Is that you know what was it like? Because there was a fall, right, of the
Sure.
restaurant, and what was it really like to you know go through all that? I mean, you answered the door for the feds,
Yeah.
so what was that like going through all that?
It was very unexpected, very challenging time. This all happened whenever we were at the height of all of our success. So I talked a little bit about the celebrities and people that used to come in. The restaurant also had just won an international Dorona Award, which is equivalent to a James Beard Award, but back during the time of the early 2000s, 90s, and 80s, James Beard was just for chefs. So now it's very different. It's even for books and media, but during that time it was just for chefs. So we had just won a very prestigious Dorona Award, and we were kind of coming off of that high. We were busy every single night. 83-seat restaurant that sometimes on the weekends would serve 300 or 400 people on a Saturday night. No reservations, come and wait in line type of place. And so it was really shocking when all of that happened. I always tell people that it would have been handled differently had it happened today. His name was mentioned in a federal grand jury case. He was not a person of interest. Somebody else mentioned him as a person of interest. And whenever that happens at the time, it's automatically a criminal case and not a civil case, even though there was an offer and compromise that was offered that was rejected. And the federal government has a 99% rate in being able to convict somebody. So for him, it was just a matter of time, and there was a lengthy investigation, and he eventually pled guilty to tax evasion charges and served 5 months in the West Virginia men's federal facility. And that was very tough for everybody, my entire family. But it was especially tough on him to lose that restaurant. And I would say it was really challenging on the community too, because that was the staple place to go and to be, and to have that kind of ripped away from us whenever we were, first of all, least expecting it. And second of all, at the height of all of the Primadonna craze, as people would refer to it, it was very challenging time.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I actually it's funny because I worked for an equivalent place in, when I was lived in Norristown. It was called Ray's Diner and Malt Shop,
Yeah.
and it's one of those staples that,
Mhm.
people and unfortunately, Ray died.
Oh,
So,
yes.
and it was like, all of a sudden, this place is gone,
Yep.
and everyone was like, "Where are we supposed to go?"
What
And
are we
there's all
gonna
kinds of
do?
great
Yeah.
places, right? What do we do now? But
Yes,
on Sunday
absolutely.
mornings, there was a 2-hour wait for Sunday breakfast, you know?
Yeah. It becomes the fabric of a community whenever you have a business, like the Prima Donna or like Ray's, restaurant, like you're speaking about. It becomes a place for people to congregate. I think what we miss most about it, what my dad misses most about it, is it becomes the hub for where people go, and you get the unique opportunity of celebrating with people their highest highs. So if somebody gets a promotion, right, they're going to come down to the Prima Donna. So you get to walk through all of those really wonderful moments, see engagements sort of happen before your eyes. Also, be with people through those hard times. Sometimes people would have wakes and different things at the restaurant, and we would know the people that had passed away for a really long time, and it was really nice to be able to celebrate their lives with their family members in a very intimate setting. So the prima donna was a lot of things to a lot of people, and whenever that was kind of ripped under the rug, I think that there was a good amount of shock and grief, as you had said, and scramble of, okay, well, what do we do next, and where do we go, and where's Joe? I need to go and have a beer after work, or I need my fried zucchini. That was always our staple. So it was hard. It hit everybody really hard.
Now I need fried zucchini.
Well, I'll give you a tip. So,
Yeah,
we used to slice our zucchini on an actual deli slicer,
okay.
long ways, thin strips, and then obviously douse it in an egg wash and flour, breading mixture, and then we deep fried it. So it was very light, crispy. Not overdone, just kind of the perfect appetizer as you would have it, your entree into the meal.
Yeah, I am like I'm sitting here going, "I have zucchini. Um,
I can do this. I
I
can
can
make
do
it
this."
work. Yeah.
Of course, I'm gonna do it in an air fryer these days, but, I can make zucchini, fried zucchini now. Ah, the crazy things that come up in these conversations. So, from there, obviously, you're younger, much younger, and you went off and you end up on LA Talk Radio?
Yeah, so, yeah, that was, you've done your research on me, so, yes, that was you know, I always say that life is very serendipitous, so I graduated from Syracuse University in 2003 and met a wonderful guy up there, who was my boyfriend at the time, my husband now, and he really wanted to move to LA, and I had not really known much about LA, but I knew that I was at a low point in my life and I wanted to get out of Pittsburgh. And so we moved after college there. And I started just as a fluke. It was a really challenging time for me going through everything that we were going through. But I went to a presentation where this really crazy, wonderful, amazing Catholic nun named Sister Suzanne Jabro was talking about a nonprofit that she started called Get on the Bus. And it took children to go and see their incarcerated parents once a year for Mother's and Father's Day. And at the time, it was just Mother's Day. And I was really touched by what she said and how the organization started, which very simple. She was going to bring a delegation of Catholic women to go and visit the women in prison because they had said that they never receive any visitors. And so she was all excited about this. She presented it to the women, and the women said, well, why would we have all of these strangers come up and visit us whenever we haven't seen our own families and our own children for several years? And she said, what? How long has it been since you've seen your families? And it had been between 4 and 17 years since they had seen their children. So she said, that's it. We're getting a bus and we're going. And through hell or high water, she made that happen and brought 17 families, 50 people on that first bus, and really started the organization from there. And so whenever I met her, I was really touched by what it was that she was doing. I thought it would be very healing and helpful for me to get involved. And I started speaking about my story on behalf of her organization and doing homilies all over the place because, as she used to tell me, I can take you to Pasadena and nobody's scared. I can take you to South Central and you can still hang, you know? So we had a lot of fun going around and speaking on the behalf of her organization. And then there was a fluke. Again, life is very serendipitous. And the director that was overseeing the program just quit one day. And um, the nun said, need somebody to fill this position. And I have somebody else in mind. And I said, well, who's that? And she said, you. I said, I can't do that. I'm just out of college and this is a statewide decentralized organization. And she said, you can do it. It'll be easy. Well, that was a lie. Nothing in life is ever easy, but she was right. I could do it with her confidence. And I started running the organization. And through that, it opened up so many doors for me to be a voice for social justice. And a really cool opportunity came up, and I was able to co host a radio show on LA Talk Radio. It was called The Scales of Justice. And we used to interview people from all works of the social services field about different ways that they were addressing the issue of social justice. And so we had people on from the foster care system and people that worked in direct services and people from the prison and people really all over the place that were doing some innovative programming. And it was a lot of fun. It was a cool little side gig for somebody that was just slightly out of college that started their college major as a broadcast journalism person and then pursued more of the nonprofit PR world. But you know, I'm grateful that I did it for a while. I understand your shoes because it is not easy. It was really challenging to be able to fill our guest calendar and to do all the research that you have to do in order to do a great job at interviewing people and to hope that people show up whenever they said that they would. We just did live in the studio for the most part. So, it was cool. That was my little parlay into radio for a little while.
That's so awesome. So, what took you from so you went to the West Coast, you did
Sure.
the whole thing, and now you're back on the East Coast.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I know for a fact being on the East Coast is different than anywhere else in the
Oh,
world.
yeah, yeah.
So, what was the
I
this?
I am like an East Coast girl through and through. It's just and I'm a Northeast girl through and through. We just recently I do a lot of traveling for the book. I'm always on tour, and I recently just did an event in Florida, and it was great. I had a great time. I met a lot of awesome people, but just the norms. I grew up in a community that was highly immigrant based. So I'm very comfortable around Italian people. I'm used to that culture. That's how we grew up. That's, who we were. I was just on an interview right before your interview with a girl that I grew up with. And we were talking about the fabric of McKees Rocks and what makes it a different place. And many people from Southern Italy left everything and came to McKees Rocks for a better life in the steel mill era. So they knew each other back in Italy. They kind of transported to the United States and ended up in McKees Rocks. So it's a very close knit community. It's one with a lot of culture and a lot of pride. If you're Pittsburgh through and through. You're watching the Steelers on Sunday. It doesn't matter if you're living there or not. You're getting some Mancini's bread, which is the bakery that is just amazing, kind of known for the crunchiness of the bread on the outside and the chewiness on the inside, and you could smell it all down the streets and the rocks. But, there's a lot of pride and a lot of culture in that, and, you take it for granted, but I go to a grocery store in Pittsburgh or here in New Jersey. I was doing a cooking class making ricotta gnocchi. We know, like, we have several different brands to choose from with ricotta cheese anywhere you go to the Northeast. It's just because there's a lot of Italian people here. You go other places in the country, they don't know what ricotta cheese is. Like, I need I need ricotta cheese. What, cottage cheese? No, 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 no. I need ricotta cheese. It's blended. Oh, you need cream cheese? That's no, I don't need cream cheese. I need ricotta cheese. Um, so it's just kind of where you grew up, where you're most comfortable. And my whole family is in Pittsburgh. I love Pittsburgh. It is my second home away from home. I'm there quite a bit. And I love Jersey too. I mean, it's definitely a place. It's where my husband is from, but it's definitely a place where it feels like home to me. It feels very familiar. And like I said, I mean, I'm just comfortable around the same kind of environment of people that I grew up around. And not to say that the West Coast wasn't that, but and the West Coast definitely has the weather and it's beautiful, and it wasn't me. It really wasn't me. And I struggled with it, but I'm much happier here. I'm always going to be an East Coast girl and I don't mind visiting, but it's who I am. And I love the culture here, and I actually don't really mind the seasons either. Winter, wish it was a little bit shorter, but I love the fall and the spring and the summer. So I'm happy to be back here.
Yeah, especially in Jersey, you go to the shore, it's
Yeah.
it's like you're at the shore, it's all's well, and then as fall happens, you're watching leaves change, and you're at the shore and watching leaves fall into it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. It's a beautiful place, and really, I really didn't spend much time in Jersey growing up at all. So, to know that it's more than just Newark Airport, it's really, I mean, I live in a beautiful mountainous area with lakes and very nature based, very outdoorsy. So, Jersey's got a little bit for everybody. And so does Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful inland cities. Just more bridges than Paris. It's just a beautiful place, and the people are so nice. I miss Pittsburgh people. If I'm gone for more than a month, I have to go back. So I'm like,
Yeah.
just it's the south of the north, you
Mhm.
know.
It's actually funny because Pittsburgh, I was always going into Philadelphia. My family's all from south of Philly and um over by Valley Forge, and so we would go twice a year to go visit family, and then I had family that was in Jersey, over in Ocean City, so it was kind of like we would, if it was summertime, we would go over there for a couple days and, switch back and forth kind of thing. But what was really great about it is that it always rains in Pittsburgh. It
Yeah.
was it was a joke. If there was gonna be precipitation anywhere, Pittsburgh was where it's gonna be,
Yes.
and it doesn't matter if it was summer or winter, it either snowed or rained.
Yep.
And when I moved to Florida, I was up there, I was going through, and it was this horrible, horrible storm, and it was literally, we were in the cloud that the storm was happening in.
Oh,
So it
jeez.
was like
Yeah, there's a
literally,
whole different when it rains in Florida, it is like a monsoon. When we
yeah,
landed last week and there was a tornado warning, there's sheets of rain that come across that
uh-huh,
you can kinda see where it's starting and ending, and then there's these buckets of rain where I'm not sure it's like it's very scary, you know? Feel like you're on, like, Noah's Ark or something. Yeah, it's quite something, the
yeah,
rain down there,
yeah,
for
but
sure.
Pittsburgh was awesome. I actually remember we broke down one time, just outside of Pittsburgh by the Crayola factory. There was a Crayola store.
Oh, yes, that's actually right outside of Philly. Right outside of Philly is the Crayola factory, and it's still there,
Yeah.
actually. I
No, there was I think it was just a store, I don't think it was the factory. But it was the first time I actually saw a Crayola store that you could go in
Oh,
and, like, pick your own colors,
yes.
and it was
Yeah,
really
they
cool.
do have that. They do have the choose your own color adventure, make your own crayons. That's a
Mhm.
fun thing too.
It was fun. Um, so what was your impetus to write the book?
So the book started as a family history project some 17 years ago. I knew that my dad's happiest times were at the Primadonna. He always missed his customers and people that would come and see him. So I just started asking him very simple questions like, Dad, tell me a time when a celebrity came in, or tell me a time where you were expecting one thing to happen, something totally different happened at the restaurant, or tell me about the first bar fight, all of those really interesting little tidbits. And I had one of those old fashioned tape decks where I would record professors, and I just recorded the stories and I got him telling it in his own voice. And that's how it all started. And then how it got to where it is now. My former AP English teacher, Ruthie Dines Robbins, shout out to her if she's on Facebook and listening right now. She's incredible and amazing. And she was editing. We'd always stayed in touch. We have 20 degrees of Kevin Bacon. She grew up right across the street from the building that was once the Prima Donna. She was my middle school teacher, high school teacher several times. Her children were basically around the same age as me and my sister, and we were always close friends with them. We even, whenever I moved to LA, her oldest son also moved to LA separately. So, we would get together and have dinners together. And my husband and he were pretty close. And, we had a great time together. And whenever Ruthie had learned that I was writing this book, um, I showed her some parts of it and she said, would you mind if I took this to get some feedback from my writers group? And I said, sure, that's fine. And so she did. And whenever she came back, they said two things. And the first thing was what I knew is that the book needed a lot of work. But the second thing is they said the book has a tremendous amount of commercial potential. So it was really from then that we decided to partner together and write it together. And her writing group actually made the suggestion that we should write it in my dad's voice. Her friend, author, mystery crime author, Lisa Redman, had made that suggestion. And once we did that, because originally the book was partially in my father's voice, partially in my voice, it sounds like it would be really interesting, but it was very confusing to the reader because they couldn't really tell who the narrator was. And also, whenever my dad started the restaurant, I was 4 years old. So you don't have that omniscient perspective at 4 years old that you would have, as you're 20 or even 30. So I don't think that it worked for what it was, but it was a good first try. Whenever we started to write as my dad, the project became very fun. And he's a very large personality, kind of a larger than life personality. So it's easy to know what he would think in a certain situation. And there have been several times where interviewers have said to me, I wish your dad was here because I would love to ask him about X, Y, or Z. And I said, well, he's not, but I can tell you what he would say about X, Y, or Z. Because whenever we were writing this book, sometimes Ruthie and I would dream as we were like we were him, even though we weren't. And it was always the joke, the what would Jesus do? Jesus Christ do? We would say, like, what would Joe Costanzo do in the situation that's presented to us? So it was little things like that that kind of got us into the right mood as writers. And it's hard to tell in the book the pieces that she wrote versus the pieces that I wrote. It was really a collaborative back and forth. My dad was definitely part of that process too, relaying stories, giving us more information. His brain works in a very different way. He can remember vividly dates and minute details that most people can't. So I would ask him things like, Dad, when was the first time you renovated the restaurant? And he would say, it was June of 19 so and so. It was a Thursday and this guy did it. And this is like what he was wearing. So he has that very photographic memory, which I think was very helpful being, a major restaurateur, because he could remember things about you or about your family that he didn't need to write down. They just went straight into his long-term memory. So it was good that I was writing the book with him, because if I was writing the book with somebody like me who can't even remember if I ate lunch yet or not, like that would have been really problematic. But he was really good about having things in his mind chronologically that we could then translate and kind of write down and write into this story. And it was really a fun project. I mean, it definitely, we're not prolific or quick writers, but we do like to get it right. And we spent a lot of time really thinking about how to frame it all together. My husband was formerly in the film industry, as is my friend Dave Paratano. If he's out there listening, shout out to Dave. And they were probably one of our toughest critics as far as beta reads went, but they agreed on everything, which normally, if you have two or more people that agree, you should probably listen to
Yeah.
them. And one of the things that they asked, because we had a lot of really great stories in there, is does this story move the narrative forward? And, you can argue up the wazoo, but in the end, that's a yes or no answer.
Yeah.
And if the answer was no, as good as it was, it fell onto the cutting room floor. And we were also, Ruthie and I, we took this personality test recently. It's called, I think, 16 personalities or something. She had me take it. It's kind of off of the Myers-Briggs test.
Mhm.
And weirdly enough, we're both the same personality type, which is only like 2% of the population has our personality type. But one of the attributes of this personality type is that we're incredibly empathetic, and that we can really understand where other people are coming from. And I think that for us, when you have two really empathetic people writing a memoir, we're always thinking very carefully about all of the people that were featured in the book, making sure that first of all, their sides of the story were represented. And second of all, if the story in any way compromised who they were either at the time or now, thinking about not including that. And it's just a personal choice that we made as writers. A book that's being comped to ours right now is called Your Table is Served. And it's well done. It's by a guy who was a former maitre d' in some big New York City restaurants during the same time. But I think the main difference that you'll find is that he has celebrities in his book too, but he says a lot of negative things about the celebrities, that this person is cheap or this person is, a jerk. When you read On the Rocks, because hopefully you will read On the Rocks, that's not the vibe that we give off. We're very positive, and that's because part of the reason why is my dad is a very positive person.
Mhm.
And it was really important for us to portray people how they were, but also to portray people in a way that they wouldn't come back and say, On the Rocks ruined my life. It's everybody that's in there is in there for who they are. If we needed to change names, we certainly did to protect the identities of people. But it's a feel good story. And I think that at a time where there's a lot of dissension in this country, regardless of what side of anything that you're on, there's a lot of dissension and there's a lot of people yelling from both sides. But this is one of those few stories that I think that everybody can get something from because it's about unity and it's about love and resiliency and family and rooting for the underdog. Who doesn't like an underdog, right?
Exactly. Exactly, and it's so important these days that we remember that we're all humans.
Yes, and I think that that's one of the reasons why this book has taken off in the way that it has, and we're very much, first of all, we're very surprised pleasantly by that. But second of all, we're very grateful and humble and appreciative in that. But I think that there is a duality about being human, that we all have very wonderful attributes about us, every single person that's out there listening. And a lot of times it's easy to identify those and things that you're really good at, or those parts of you that are very strong. We all have darker sides of us. And they may not be apparent to the rest of the world. Some people kind of live in the shadows and struggle with things like addiction or mental health wellness or whatever it might be. But we all have those parts of us that we don't want to advertise. And I think the beauty of On the Rocks is we talk about both sides of what it's like to be human. And yes, there were certainly mistakes made, um, but everybody makes mistakes. And where do you go from there? You cannot live in a place of regret. You have to learn how to grow and accept and to kind of move forward, even though you might be mourning the loss of something that was. Not being in the restaurant industry was a very, very hard blow for my father. There's no doubt about that. But, kind of picking up and seeing that this book has had the potential to bring him back in a different way. So now instead of meeting with customers and serving food, he's meeting with people that are readers and fans of the book, and he's talking to them that way. We just did a really cool uh, event this weekend in Pittsburgh called Cook and Book, which I think we're going to be doing some more of them because we got really, really good feedback on it. But basically, the first hour we were cooking the ricotta gnocchi and traditional marinara sauce, from the restaurant. And then the second piece of it is we all sat down over lunch and had a book discussion. And, people were able to ask whatever was burning in their minds. And I was there and my dad was there, my mom was there. My mom has just recently started telling her side of the story. She's much more reserved than the rest of us, but she did a beautiful job. If you go onto my Facebook page at Joe Costanzo Primadonna, she did a beautiful job on Tuesday night at the McKees Rocks Historical Society telling her side of the story. And so, it becomes cool. It becomes an experience and an adventure. And that to me, I don't care if this book doesn't sell another copy. That to me, nobody's ever going to be able to take that away. Those memories, those experiences, being able to kind of see my dad on fire now and light up after 20 years of not being that's a blessing and that's a gift.
I love it. So, Maria, where can people get in touch with you? Where's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I would just go to my website. That's probably has every yep. Hey, look at that right there. Jeff, you're so good. mariacpalmer.com. And that's got all the ways to connect with us on social media. Our media tab. So if you want to learn more about the book or other interviews or reviews, we just got some pretty great reviews recently from the Pittsburgh Post Gazette, Pittsburgh City Paper. That's all on there. And the events. We do events now all around the country. I got out of my comfort zone. I was just basically staying in Pittsburgh and here in New Jersey, but we have some stuff planned later in this year for Rhode Island, for potentially another event in the South, many more really cool events in Pittsburgh, some pop-up kind of foodie stuff that we're working on that's going to be like a quarterly thing. Going to the New York Public Library this weekend. So it's, really the sky is the limit. And I will certainly do book clubs, especially virtual book clubs, if I'm not able to get there. Ruthie and I did a great one with the Parkinson's Foundation of Western Pennsylvania. So yeah, that's a great way to get all the info.
I love it. I love it. It has been such a pleasure and a privilege to be able to speak with you today.
Thank
I mean,
you.
it
Likewise.
I am
Likewise.
I can't wait to read the book. It's
Yay.
definitely in my Amazon to be read list. Um, and I hope that I'm going to be going through there. Like, I hope that hopefully I will be able to hit up with one of the events. Now I gotta
Yeah,
go and look.
that would be
Eh
fantastic. We would love to have you. And, just for anybody that's listening too, this is something that I didn't know before I became an author. If you've read On the Rocks and you liked it, please let other people know. Takes 5 seconds to do a quick Amazon review, even just with the headline, with a nice hearty number of stars, or on Goodreads or anywhere where you can review books. This helps authors so much, especially authors that were not published with a Simon Schuster or huge publisher. It allows other people to see and discover us. So I'm grateful to all of you who have. We have quite a number of Amazon reviews, and I'm hopeful that we'll get some more too. And thank you all for loving On the Rocks in the same way that we do. So.
yeah, on that, it puts you in Amazon's if the reviews is what keeps you in Amazon's, algorithm,
Mhm.
so it really is important. I've worked with authors for actually, that's why how I became an entrepreneur is working with authors, so totally get that, and yes, definitely go and review. It's important. Check out her book. Talk to her. Maria is just such a fantastic person, and I'm so glad
Oh,
that I got to
thank
know
you.
her.
Thank you, Jeff. You're the
I am
best.
I am looking forward now I have a reason to actually wanna be in Pittsburgh. So,
There you go.
it's not
There
gonna
you
rain.
go.
Well, it probably will,
No,
but,
well, it might. I think one year, I went from Pittsburgh to Syracuse, which I think they have flopped at different times as the least sunniest cities in America. So,
Yeah.
but we just bring the sunshiny personalities. That's all you can do and hope for
That's
the
all you can do.
best.
Well, it's because you're in the middle of the mountain. You're in the middle of the freaking storm. So
Yep.
I don't. As they come across, you're right there. Here you go. So
Yep.
I got it.
Exactly, it's okay. But Pittsburgh people, we are really good, down to earth people, very friendly. Like I said, it's
Really.
the south of the north, as far as hospitality, and just love my Pittsburgh peeps.
We love you guys. Guys, to catch us on Create Nomad Show next week. We'll have another really great guest. Maria, it really has been a pleasure to have you on.
Thank
And
you. Thanks,
I
Jeff. Likewise.
guys soon.
Thank you for watching the Creative Nomad Show. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, check out creativenomadshow.com. There is also a link at the bottom if you are an awesome creator and would like to be a guest. Know that you are loved.
Everyone here at the True Awesome Network asks you to please subscribe, like, comment, and spread awesome.